being the fastest quarterback you've never seen. I'll be right back. There's no quicker way to get into DFS. Play Super Draft today and see for yourself.
We're behind. They're all fired up. What we got to do? First place, our defense has got to go out there and take the ball. Then when we get the ball, we got to have 11 people that's going to do their job and try to score every time you get the football. If we do that, we'll be all right. If we do that, we'll be all right.
Happy Monday, everybody. This is another edition of Football University with me, Matt Cadell. Glad to have you here. We got so much exciting football news from the NFL, free agency, former Bama players, the draft, Lamar Jackson, NFL teams, the Falcons. We know we got a lot of Falcons fans out there, but at the end of the day, we like to bring things back to Alabama. So RTR, roll tide, roll to the Bama Nation. We're pretty excited. It's March. We have March Madness. So kudos to the Alabama basketball team. But this is Football University, where we get into everything, anything football news, and bring it back to Alabama. So if you're in, hit that like, subscribe button. If you're in, want to make comments, get into the student section. Shouts out to 6-0, Stephen Hicks, Lori Cadell. And get in the student section. We're going to get started. So it's March Madness. Bama celebrating winning the SEC championship, being the #1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. And I got to say, so RTR to that. So transitioning from the #1 overall seed, we find a way to bring it back to Alabama. And I want to go with the NFL draft. I know I got to start in the NFL. That's what we do at Football University. And I have to say, big news over the weekend. We knew the previous week the Chicago Bears had the #1 pick. I thought they should, stick with Justin Fields. And they did. And breaking news over the weekend, the Carolina Panthers traded up to #1 pick. And it broke the internet, and now Chicago Bears have the #9 pick. But Carolina Panthers coming off the NFL Combine, the timing of this is so unique. If you're the Carolina Panthers, you're starting to hear reports. And as soon as this news broke, everybody was saying, oh, they had Bryce Young in the Carolina jerseys, uniforms, already saying he's going there. And a lot of people think that it's between Bryce Young, who to me, I believe Bryce is the #1 overall player in this draft. But you're going to have some teams that might have been like the Panthers. You're going to start hearing a lot more about C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young at the #1 pick. What do you think the Carolina Panthers are going to do? So you're starting to hear some things regarding the Carolina Panthers with that #1 pick. first you look at the timing. I think they have leaving the combine. I think they were impressed with both Bryce Young as well as CJ Stroud. But I think there is a little divide in between the two. I think with the Carolina Panthers, the owner, David Tepper, I think he loves Bryce Young. But, he hired Frank Reich. And I think Frank Reich, if you look at his history with quarterbacks, he prefers bigger quarterbacks. Accuracy is huge. So, both CJ Stroud and Bryce Young check the box there. But Frank Reich, I think he's more of a CJ Stroud type of guy. The Carolina Panthers GM, Scott Fitterer, he came from Seattle, who saw Russell Wilson win a Super Bowl. And so he probably has a little bit more experience with a shorter quarterback. So when it comes to the Carolina Panthers, you're going to start hearing a lot more about Bryce Young versus CJ Stroud versus Bryce Young, and what does that mean for the number one overall pick. And for me, I think, for me, Bryce Young is still the best overall player. But just hearing what I'm hearing, you don't know about the GM or the head coach. Does the decision come down to Frank Reich? If it does, and they pass up on Bryce Young, it would be CJ Stroud. I do believe it's a two-man race between the two, but I think it's a win-win. But I'm all Bryce. To me, Bryce is just a magician. He's like Steph Curry, Allen Iverson, Drew Brees, all put together. Mahomes with about 10 to 20%. Mahomes with the magician ability, all rumbled in one. I think Bryce Young does it, but CJ Stroud is really good. So I will say, the betting odds right now for Vegas, they actually have CJ Stroud with better odds to go number one to the Carolina Panthers. So you don't know. It's be interesting to see how these things transpire in the next couple of weeks with pro days. I think Ohio State is on the 24th of March. I think Alabama's the 25th right after that. It's going to be so interesting to see. But you look at the timing of making this move. If you look at Scott Fitterer, the GM, this is what we do at Football University. We find ways to just talk football. Do you think they're trying to play, they have their guy already, or they're still going to, find a way to come off Bryce Young or go to a CJ Stroud, or come off a CJ Stroud and go to a Bryce Young? It'll be very interesting to see the timing of the move so early. I think we're about 6 weeks away from the actual draft. A lot of time can go on. They can convince themselves off guys other teams could be calling to get to that number one spot. But it's going to be so interesting. So I just had to start off that first topic talking about the Carolina Panthers, in Charlotte. I was just up there not too long ago, and I was like, man, Bryce Young could be here, but we don't know. So I had to start that off with that first topic, talking about the Carolina Panthers and that number one pick. So before I get to my next topic, let's get to the student section. Just Saban said Bryce Young will go early in the first round. Him and Will for sure. 6-0 brought up a great point. Speaking of Bama players finding a way to bring it back to Alabama, a lot of free agency news, and this is probably the biggest news of the weekend. Deron Payne, the defensive tackle out of Birmingham, Alabama, Shays Valley, 5-star, number one player in the state, won multiple championships at the University of Alabama, which is like the United States. And being the number one pick, first number 13 pick, I believe, number 10 pick for the Washington Commanders. And he got his second contract he was franchise tagged last week, but I guess they couldn't agree, so they slapped the tag on him. And now they came to terms on the deal, 4-year, $90 million. He's the highest paid defensive tackle outside of Aaron Donald. So shouts out to Deron Payne. Listen, you come to Alabama, you get paid. That's what you do. But another sneaky good interesting news. Speaking of Alabama players in the free agency, the Miami Dolphins, you look at Chris Greer, Mike McDaniels, Tua, they decided to extend Tua for that 5th-year option. Now Tua will be making about $23 million next season. And, if Tua proves himself, takes them deep into the playoffs, hopefully he has a Jalen Hurts-like run going to the Super Bowl. Tua's going to get the big contract. So shouts out to Tua, shouts out to Deron Payne, those guys making moves. So let's stay in the student section real quick. We got a lot of roll ties. Joe Stapleton, Linda P., Stephen Hicks. Stephen Hicks says, how about the Bama SEC champions and the #1 seed? Yeah, I started talking about Bama basketball. Shouts out to Nate Oates, Brandon Miller, Quinterly, those guys. I mean, they have such a great team. You know, they won the SEC regular season title as well as the SEC basketball tournament. So very excited for them. And they got the #1 overall seed. So they're starting down in Birmingham. So it's going to be interesting. I think they have a good road, but, you know, I just want them to win and go win it all. So everybody, I know this is football university, but fill out your brackets before this weekend. We'll be interested to see how far Bama goes since it's March Madness. So yeah, a lot of people are excited about football season. Me too as well. So let's stay in the NFL, and I want to go to my next topic. I talked about Bryce Young, how he's, you know, compared to other players, Steph Curry. I want to talk about if you're the Houston Texans, and I think if you look at the Houston Texans, DeMeco Ryans, you know, one of my great teammates, I think you look at the Houston Texans and you got to say, hopefully you don't want to be hoping, waiting on the #2 spot and you don't get your guy. Carolina gets your guy. If you look at the Houston Texans could have had the #1 pick. If you go back to week 18, they played the Indianapolis Colts for a meaningless game. They lose this game, they're going to be the #1 pick. But yet they score on the 4th and 20, then go for the 2-point conversion and win the game. And so they drop to the #2 pick. Sneaky news came out. They lost a 5th-round pick this past weekend. I was thinking, man, does that have an effect on their Bryce Young sweepstakes? But if you're DeMeco Ryans, the Houston Texans, Mechie, Christian Harris, Nick Caserio, you kind of have to be kind of happy to kind of be at that #2 pick. I believe from what I'm starting to hear, a lot of people are saying Frank Wright likes CJ Stroud for the #1 pick with the Carolina Panthers. I gave you the odds earlier, but if you're the Houston Texans, you kind of have to be nervous as well as happy. I think all the Houston Texans fans out there in H-Town in Houston, they want Bryce Young. If you look at the fan base, they are so excited about the opportunity to have Bryce Young. They have all the jersey swaps. They were actually devastated this past weekend when Carolina traded up to the #1 spots. All I saw was how upset they were about them potentially losing Bryce Young. So listen, I still think Bryce Young is the main event when it comes to this draft. So if you're the Houston Texans, man, listen, I still think Bryce is probably going to be a Houston Texan, Indianapolis Colt, Carolina Panther player. I think it's going to come down to those 3 teams. But it's interesting to see. So I had to bring up the Houston Texans perspective. I know the Houston Texans really want Bryce Young. And so I don't think the sweepstakes are over yet. And speaking of Bryce Young, I keep talking about Bryce, but he's that dynamic of a player. Bryce Young has NFL owners really want him. That is 3 NFL owners I have heard raving about Bryce Young. Jim Irsay, we heard him in the press conference about a month ago talking about that Alabama kid is not that bad. McNair, I'm quite sure he really wants the owner for the Houston Texans. I'm quite sure he really wants Bryce Young. Looking at all the debacle from, you know, Deshaun Watson and all the off the field issues and all that craziness, not having a sustainable quarterback, being in the quarterback driven league. You know, he's probably fell in love with Bryce Young. And you look at David Tepper. I mentioned David Tepper earlier, I think he's in love with Bryce Young. You know, he's been inside. He wants to win now. He's probably just fell in love with Bryce Young. But I think they're kind of split within that front office from the head coach, the GM, and the owner. But I think Bryce Young has a lot of love from these NFL owners. And you look at a Jim Irsay at the Indianapolis Colts. The reason I say this, these are owners that are falling in love with Bryce Young. And when you get owners, owners run the show in the NFL. So whatever the GM says is cool. It's still got to get passed by the owner. So you look at these owners. That's why I say I don't think the Bryce Young sweepstakes are over. The Panthers, if they solidify that their guy is C.J. Stroud, I wouldn't be, if not C.J. Stroud, if it is, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody like the Colts move up at 4 or the Houston Texans at number 2, jump one more spot to get their hands on Bryce Young, who I think is going to be that number 1 pick. So let's get to the student section. Let's get to a few questions in the student section. 60 says, Matt, do you think Adrian Peterson will get a chance to play for one more year in the NFL or he retire finally? Great question. Adrian Peterson has been out of the league for a couple of years. I just think, once you have not been played in the league in over a year or two, I think it's kind of your window is not as open. And I think he's probably going to retire a Minnesota Viking. I don't think he was on the team last year, not that I know of. So, you're looking at the value of running backs in the NFL, how they're not as valued as they were in the previous years or decades before. So I do see Adrian Peterson probably retiring. So that's my 2 cents on Adrian Peterson. Jeff Stapleton getting right to it, going to 8A. So 8A should be really competitive. I want to see Ty Simpson show out. Listen, this is what we do at Football University. Thanks for that comment. Listen, I think Ty Simpson is really good. I think he has elite art and talent. I'm just going off what I saw on the game film when he played in the game. Now, no digs or Milroe. Milroe is exceptionally fast. He's quick. Just my experience, I just wish he didn't fumble the ball as much. If he doesn't turn the ball over, if he can distribute the ball, at the end of the day, Saban's going to go with the guy who can take control of the offense and drive this Lamborghini of offense that we have. Get us in the right play, get the offensive line in the right front. Do not turn the ball over. Distribute the ball. No interceptions. Getting it to our playmakers, making the right mental decisions versus defenses in pressure situations and guiding us, being a leader. I think those attributes are going to go a long way because that's how Saban rolls. So it's like I said, I'm going to be interested to see how Ty Simpson is going to do. Wow, student section is off and running. So let's go to Nick Saban Jr. He's got a great point right here. He says, what are your thoughts on Jalen Ramsey to the Dolphins? Great point. We mentioned Tua earlier. I think this move just solidifies the Miami Dolphins putting all their guns, saying, listen, not only do we want to win the division, we're coming for the Buffalo Bills, but at the same time, Tua, we're running with you for this year. I think they're happy with Tua. I think, you were hearing Lamar Jackson sweepstakes. A lot of teams saying, hey, the Dolphins should go after Lamar Jackson. But I think they did show confidence. I think they're excited where Tua is at. You showed what he did with Waddle and Tyreek Hill. I think the next step for them is to shore up that offensive line, give Tua some help on the running back. I think they'll have that type of stride, kind of like Jalen Hurts and the Eagles this year. So great comment from my guy, Nick Saban Jr. So let's go to Bryce Young. And we're going back to Bryce Young because that's what we do at Football University. To me, Bryce Young is the story of the draft. I call it the Bryce Young Invitational. Matt, would it not be better for Bryce to go to a lower draft pick and it has a good offensive line? That's why I think, great point, Spencer. That's why I think Bryce Young is a big in play for the Indianapolis Colts and the Houston Texans. I mentioned how the NFL owners, whether it's Jim Irsay, McNair with the Texans, I think they are primed for Bryce Young, and I think they want Bryce Young. But I do think if Bryce Young does not go number 1 in Carolina, Bryce Young at 2 to the Houston Texans or the Indianapolis Colts is a better fit. You look at the Indianapolis Colts with Pittman, Jonathan Taylor at running back. They have a veteran offensive line. Defense is pretty decent. I think that's a great fit for Bryce. playing in the indoor dome. Also, Houston Texans. We know D'Amico Ryans a defensive-led guy. But you look at the offensive line, Laramie Tunsil, Damian Pierce. You get a few more weapons. They just signed Robert Woods. They have Jonathan Mechie. They have a little bit more stability as opposed to the Carolina Panthers. I mean, the Carolina Panthers in this trade with the Chicago Bears, they traded away DJ Moore, who has been a consistently really good receiver for the Carolina Panthers. 3 years straight, I think he's caught in over 1,000 yards consistently. So, and that's with, you know who at quarterback. So you can only imagine what he's going to do with Justin Fields, them in Chicago. But listen, if Bryce goes to the Carolina Panthers, you know, who is going to throw to? Who is his offensive line? You know, who is his running back? You know, so to your point, I do think it benefits Bryce going to the great fit. That's why I think the Houston Texans or the Indianapolis Colts is the best fit for Bryce Young. So great point. So let's stay in the student section. Y'all are rolling today. Let's go. Nick Saban is going to beat down all these buses. Trust and believe. Yeah, Coach Saban is on a roll. He will be back. Let's see what 6-0 has to say. Matt Feinbaum still doubting our Alabama coach Saban by basically calling Smart the next king of college football. Your thoughts? You know, Coach Saban, if you haven't tuned in, Stephen A. Smith does a podcast called No Mercy. And his first guest was Nick Saban. Nick Saban spoke about this, but you know, internally, as I must say, Saban is a competitor. Knowing Coach Saban personally, he's one of the most competitively driven, ambitious persons that I've known. That comes to football, who runs a tight ship in his organization. And best believe, having not been to the national championship the past 2 years, losing in the national championship the year before last to Georgia in that fashion in the fourth quarter, you know, not having the depth, I think, you know, and then coming back next year, not even making it to the college football playoff. Listen, I'm quite sure Coach Saban is ready to make a lot of noise this year. You can tell by his offseason acquisitions of his coordinators, Tommy Rees, Kevin Steele. I think he's going to get Pruitt back on the staff, Robert Bala, all those type of guys. It's going to be exciting. I know he wants to get back to running the ball, being dominant. So great comment right there. Let's stay in the student section. Van Edwards said, I can't wait for Bryce Young to be the first overall pick since Joe Namath. Yeah, I'm excited for Bryce. I still think, you know, for Bryce, I want him to go number one, but, you know, I want him to go number one if it's the Carolina Panthers. You know, I want the Carolina Panthers to have an incremental plan for his success. You know, don't just take him because you love him, and don't invest into a plan or a vision, you know, putting on weapons, offensive line, defense, decent defense, a good offensive scheme behind him to be successful. You know, that's why I say, you know, I still think Bryce is more of a Houston Texans, Indianapolis Colts. You know, although I want Bryce to go number one, at the end of the day, I want Bryce to go to the best fit. And I still think the Colts and the Texans are probably the best fits. You look at, you know, I gave my points earlier, but, you know, if he goes number one, I want the Panthers to have, you know, if it's not the Panthers, as long as a team has a plan in place for Bryce, like I said, weapons, offensive line, defensive line, coaching, playing to his strengths, being effective. That's what's important to take care of your quarterback and Bryce Young. So great comment, great question. So let's get to my next comment. Thanks for all those comments right there. Since we're on the Bryce train, let's roll with. I mean, let's be honest. I feel like it's a lot of Bryce Young disrespect. I'm not gonna say disrespect, but I'm like, just shade out there. I'm like, I don't know what people are like. Oh, Bryce Young is not this. I'm like, have you not looked at the tape? Like, this guy is a magician. This guy is Steph Curry. This guy is Drew Brees with a hint of Mahomes. I'm not gonna say he's exactly Mahomes, but I think he has those characteristics, those traits. Extending plays, being able to feel pressures, the poise, the accuracy, you know, that type of, you know, arm talent, that type of mind. But yeah, I mean, I just, to your point, I think Bryce solidified it year before last, playing in that SEC championship, coming off that Iron Bowl victory, winning the last drive where he made, he basically won the Heisman on that drive in Jordan Hare, coming back down, down 10 points, going into overtime and winning it. But then the next week, going to Atlanta, playing the number one defense in the country in the Bonnet Georgia Bulldogs, and Alabama was ranked like 2 or 3 or something like that. We had to win to get in the playoffs or whatnot. And basically, Bryce Young really solidified himself against that number one defense versus Georgia. I mean, he made play after play. I think he was like 23, 26 of 40, 30 of 40 for like 400 and some yards, 3 TDs in the air. I mean, it was unreal numbers. So to do that against one of the top defenses, to me, that solidified it for Bryce Young. Great point right here. I love how we just going on the draft here in the student section. He said, let all the haters go out and get Denard Robertson 2.0. And I mean, AKA Anthony Richardson, or that guy from Kentucky who was worse than Joe Flacco. Listen, I said it here before. I am not as high on Will Levis. Will Levis to me is like my 4th, maybe 5th quarterback. I think once I started getting there, you have to kind of put in Hendon Hooker. I just look at his numbers, his stats compared to Will Levis, who threw 24, 23 picks the past 2 seasons there at Kentucky. So his decision making, I mean, everybody's gonna look at his size and all that stuff and gonna say, oh, it's Will Levis. But I'm not as high on Will Levis. But AR-15, AR-15, great talent. He only started 13 games. But to me, it's mystery. You don't know how great he's going to be. So, I mean, you can fall in love with how great he looks in shorts and, running the 40 and all these measurables. I mean, he's blowing it out the roof, but he's been training for it. So you can't help but think, know he's going to blow it out the roof. So kudos to AR-15. My thing is what happens on the field in those crunch times. And to me, he is my 3rd best quarterback. Right now, I have Bryce Young, CJ Stroud as my top 2 guys when it comes to the quarterbacks in this draft. Number 3 is AR-15 and Will Levis, Hendon Hooker, that type of era. So, yeah, I mean, people are going to fall in love. They're going to fall in love with all the, the glitz and the glamour and all his numbers that he posted in the combine. My thing is I have to go and watch and look at the tape. If it lines up with the tape, the film, then it justifies. But if it doesn't line up, I have to do a lot more digging. I have to do a lot more investigation, interrogating, inquiry, questioning, why did you make this pass? What do you do best? What not do you do best? So to me, it's interesting. I think AR-15, with all the measurable, somebody's gonna reach on him. You don't know if it's the Raiders or I don't know if the Colts at 4 are be satisfied with the AR-15 with the unknowns, but I think the Colts and the Texans, I think they're set on Bryce Young. They don't get Bryce Young, they'll be glad to have CJ Stroud. So let's stay on this AR-15 topic. We talked about Bryce. Let's see. Before Van Edwards, this is a great point. He says, go watch the Kentucky game where AR-15 disappeared. He really didn't show much. Even Will Levis, when they played against each other, it really wasn't a spectacular game. For me, just when I watch Bryce Young play, it's hard for me to watch other quarterbacks in the SEC because to me, Bryce Young set the bar that high playing, even against the CJ Stroud. But, people are going to try to knock Bryce because of his height and his weight, but it is what it is. You can hate on him, but you could be missing out on a generational talent. So that leads me to my next topic. So we had crazy drama this past week, actually. And you look at that NFC South division. I'm going to try to set it up. We mentioned the Carolina Panthers being aggressive going up to that number 1 spot, going to find their quarterback. You look at the New Orleans Saints. You know, the Saints got Derek Carr. You look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They haven't said anything, but it's a team in Atlanta, the Atlanta Falcons, all the Rise Up fans out there. And I want to talk about when the Lamar Jackson exclusive franchise tag news broke. Immediately, Falcons fans was like, "Oh my goodness, Lamar Jackson to Atlanta makes so much sense." And can we just pause right there? Could you imagine the impact Lamar Jackson if Arthur Blank signed Lamar Jackson to the Atlanta Falcons? How that would just break the internet and bring Atlanta another type of energy from the Falcons' perspective. I mean, you compare it to Michael Vick, and we know Michael Vick had a pretty big impact on the Falcons, but just imagine if they get a Lamar Jackson, what that would do. The way they run that offense, Cordell Patterson running the ball. I mean, that is a win-win situation. Where it says Lamar Jackson to the Falcons is the end of Lamar. Listen, I don't know. I don't know. I'm still kind of 50-50 on that. I think the Falcons, you have not had a court, and you don't seem aggressive. Like they seem like they lack aggression. And I'm like, Falcons, what are you doing? Do something. Like, I think you could make a lot of noise for in your division. If you sign a Lamar Jackson, you automatically have probably the best quarterback in the division, because you have to outdo the Carolina Panthers, because the Carolina Panthers automatically tell you we're going to get our quarterback for the next 10 years. So, I think it's Bryce. It's going to be interesting, but like I said, I think it's a two-man horse between Bryce Young. To me, Bryce is my overall best guy, but the Falcons, man, y'all need to make some news to rise up. Falcons fans, Arthur Blank, if you need help, tune in to Football University. Hire me, Matt Cadell. I could be your next GM or football advisor. So let's get to some of the comments. Van Edwards is on one. So shouts out to Van Edwards. He says, but I will put him equal. That's from Spencer. But Van Edwards had this great comment. Bryce is a magic man. He is a magician in the backfield. In the pocket, feeling pressure, getting guys open, throwing different types of throws, underhand, sidearm throws, finding different types of windows. Bryce Young is that guy. He's the best quarterback I think, in Bama history, man. Y'all are taking shots early. I mean, let's get to Stetson as that a situation. I haven't heard any of the Dogs fans. Listen, Georgia, they've had some issues, whether it's Bennett or the four unfortunately had a fatal accident with the player, or Jalen Carter. So we don't know what's going on in that situation, but I don't know. It's all about Alabama here. So good comment. Brittany throwing shade already to Stetson Bennett. So Jeff Stapleton brought up a great point. Since we're on Bryce, I'm glad we're talking about this Bryce. Actions speak louder than words, and that's, to me, this is what have you done for me, and what have you done in clutch situations? And Coach Saban said the best. History is the best predictor of the future. You look at Bryce Young, he's not an injury-prone quarterback. He makes the best decisions, get in the right place. He's so talented with the ball. Listen, he is my type of quarterback. I haven't seen anything like Bryce. So Bryce is elite, in my opinion. Man, y'all are so funny in the comments. So let's get to my next topic before I go to my next. So we talked about all these quarterbacks. We talked about Bryce Young and the draft, the Panthers, CJ Stroud. I did bringing it back to Alabama. I know we talked about Lamar Jackson, and we know Lamar Jackson's with the Baltimore Ravens. So shout out to Ozzie Newsome. Made me think about how Ozzie Newsome, the great Alabama legend, the wizard, playing under Bear Bryant, how great Ozzie Newsome was, one of the top receivers, in my opinion, going to the Cleveland Browns, being successful there, NFL Hall of Famer, and then going to be a front office GM. We know Ozzie stepped away from being the GM, but Ozzy's probably still involved. Eric DeCosta's the new GM, but it made me think, if Ozzy was still running the show, Ozzy drafted Lamar Jackson, would this, contract situation be resolved by now? But it hasn't. So it just made me want to bring up Ozzy. I think if Ozzy was there, you had a different type. I think Ozzy had more of a relationship with the guys. You look at Ray Lewis, Shannon Sharp, those type of guys, Jamal Lewis. I think Ozzy knew some Ravens would have something to do. So speaking of Lamar Jackson, and I know I had to bring this up, and maybe we have young fans out there. I know Lamar Jackson wants his guaranteed money and he wants his contract, and you're dealing with numbers and you're dealing with business. You have to take the emotion out of it. But Lamar Jackson does not have an agent. He has his mom representing him. I think you're still missing a lot of the business side of it from Lamar's perspective. Now, I will say the Ravens and Lamar, they haven't been bad-mouthing each other, which I think is a good sign. I think Lamar Jackson will eventually play, this year for the Ravens, but I think it's important to have not only an agent, have representation. That way you can just deal with the business. You kind of have somebody, an intermediary, but you need to have good representations, get a good lawyer, get a good agent, somebody who has experience for you. That way you can kind of take the emotions out of it. You can really understand different types of contracts. You can understand different types of money. I'm hearing Lamar, he's looking for a fully guaranteed contract, and the NFL is not going to want to give you a fully guaranteed contract. What you need to try to do is get your money up front when you sign, get as much guaranteed money up front. Rumor has it that if Lamar Jackson signs on signing day, he's going to get $133 million that day. As soon as he finishes writing the N in Jackson, he's going to get $133 million. I think if you have somebody who's experiencing contracts or dealing with teams, you really know how to set up your contract situation. So all the young kids out there, if you're going to make these business decisions, get people that know how to make business decisions, get an agent, get some type of representation. I do think it helps make things a lot easier, but get good representation at that. Just don't get anybody out there. So, man, y'all are going in on Stetson Bennett. What is up with y'all just on Stetson Bennett? Stetson Bennett, he is what he is. He's one to throw shade on the guy. We know all the off the field issues, but I think he'll be a good backup in the NFL, somewhere decent. But y'all are just going in on him. Van Edwards says, sorry, I hate Georgia. Laugh out loud. Oh, man, hey, listen, I don't hate Georgia, but I understand the passion. I just bleed so much crimson that I get so competitive when it comes to other teams. So, hit that like, subscribe button. But we're going to, continue on here. Great comments in the student section. Van Edwards is on a roll, said Ravens wouldn't re-sign. They should trade up for Bryce if the Wizard of Oz there. We do know Ozzy. I think, if Ozzy is running the show, I think Ozzy would have took care of Lamar. He would have done what's best for Lamar and try to break it down for him. I think he has that type of respect from the players and has that type of relationship where he can, handle, the business aspect for it, but then make it relatable. But we know Ozzy loves Alabama guys. And if Ozzy, put the franchise tag on Lamar and Lamar goes shopping, he gets 2 first-round picks. I mean, you look at a Baltimore Ravens, he loves Bama guy. I wouldn't be surprised if he would go after her Bryce, but we know Ozzy loves his Bama guy. So shouts out to the great one and only Ozzy Newsome. So before I get to my next topic, I talked about the owners, how they love them. We talked about the divide between Bryce and Stroud with the Panthers. I talked about getting him some weapons. I discussed Frank Wright, what he wants. I kind of mentioned it earlier, and I kind of just mentioned it, which led to my, next topic, talking about I think it's best to play guys earlier. That way you won't get in these crazy contract situations. But we talked about Lamar Jackson. So let's talk about few teams. Breaking news: the NFL rules. The Eagles propose bringing back to the XFL. We know the XFL is going on right now. Shouts out to AJ McCarron, the Battlehawks, the St. Louis Battlehawks. I think AJ McCarron is undefeated 3-0. I know it's kind of been of a hard watch lately with so much going on. You got the NBA starting to roll, and everybody's waiting on spring training. But the Philadelphia Eagles actually proposed a rule to the NFL that instead of going on an onside kick, and this is just one of many rule proposals, instead of going on an onside kick, they want to take a rule from the XFL where I think in the XFL you get to go 4th and 15 to kind of retain possession. So if you convert, then you can go for, you continue to drive instead of doing an onside kick. The Philadelphia Eagles have proposed this rule for 4th and 20. If they pass this rule, do you think the NCAA and the SEC follows suit and takes the onside kick out of the game? I don't know. It'll be quite interesting to see what the SEC and college football and what NFL does with this 4th down instead of the 4th and 20, 4th and 15 instead of the onside kick. It'll be very interesting to see. So I had to get that out there. So give me your thoughts. I mean, the XFL, they've got this USFL, they got some unique rules I think makes the game a lot more interesting that I think the NFL could use. And so kudos to the Philadelphia Eagles for kind of proposing that 4th and 20 versus onside kick. Spencer says, "Oh hell no, you want the onside kick, Spencer?" But I thought it was pretty cool. It's different, I want to see how it's going to affect the game and if the college teams follow suit. So this made me get to my next topic. So we talked about Jalen Ramsey, Tua, Miami. They kind of getting the super team. I still think they need to get out, give Tua some offensive line help and give him run game help. I think that will be great. But excuse me. So Tyreek Hill, I don't know if y'all saw this. Tyreek Hill competed in this like USA track event, running the 60 meters, and he won. But it got me thinking, like, how cool would that be if instead of him competing against these guys we don't know about, what about if he competed against a Jalen Waddle or Justin Jefferson, all these different fast receivers, Stephon Diggs, putting him against some of the fastest guys in the league. And it made me thinking, this is what the NFL should do for the Pro Bowl games. Like, have a 40-yard dash or something. Make it fun. Like, have a Tyreek Hill versus Jalen Waddle. Or, like, how cool would that be? Maybe you can have the Bama receivers versus the LSU receivers in the Pro Bowl game. And maybe like a 4x1 or, some type of race just to see who has range supremacy. So it just made me think about that. But great point. Yes, they are. Back to the student section. They are passing rules to shorten the college football game. Spencer, we discussed this last week. I think if they can put a command center and instead of having the umpire on a targeting play or a pass interference play, looking into the instant replay monitor and coming up with his own decision and not having consistency in the call, I think you have to go to a command center and you let them, instead of them viewing it, just have somebody tell them what to expect on the headset. And so I think you get some consistency on the call. They're trying to have a running clock after first downs to kind of shorten the game. You can't do anything about commercials, but I think you can really get good time. And if you can address the targeting call and the pass interference call, I think that's what really shortens the game for team for, teams on top of having TV. So to your point, Spencer, I think they are addressing different types of rules to shorten college football game. Van Edwards says Tyreek is a freak, dude. Imagine if it was him, Waddle, then Jahmyr Gibbs in the backfield. I mean, Tua would destroy defenses with that speed. I mean, I think Tua is Jahmyr Gibbs. That would be a lot of speed, a lot of RPO. I think, to me, if I'm Jahmyr Gibbs and I'm looking for an exact best fit for him, I think it's somewhere either in the Kansas City Chiefs offense or the Philadelphia Eagles offense. They kind of run, they love the outside zone, different type of running backs. Gibbs don't have to be a heavy, not all do it running back, but he can come in, be kind of a specialist and increase his workload. Different, whether it's catching it out the backfield, different types. I mean, you put him with a Patrick Mahomes in that offense and a Pacheco, I mean, that puts a lot of explosiveness on the Chiefs offense with a Patrick Mahomes. You put him back there with a Jalen Hurts, that presents a lot of explosiveness with an A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. You even put him, to your point, you put him with a Tyreek Hill and Tua and Waddle. I mean, I just think it's a lot of value for Jahmyr Gibbs. I think he's going to go higher than expected because I think, football university rankings, Matt Caddell rankings, I have Bijan Robinson as my top running back. He's 1A. Jahmyr Gibbs is 1B. So those are my top two guys. And I think Bijan's going to probably go, if he doesn't go early, he's probably going to go in the teens. And I think that's just going to push, Jahmyr Gibbs' draft stock up a little bit earlier. So, great point. We heard the news. Calvin Ridley is back, reinstated, from his gambling suspension for a year. And he's going with the Jacksonville Jaguars, who is an up-and-coming team who were in the playoffs last year, led by Trevor Lawrence, Doug Peterson, Travis Etienne at running back. Now you incorporate Evan Ingram. You have an Evan Ingram. You have a Christian Kirk. You have, I believe, a DJ Chark's with the Lions. You have a Zay Jones. And now you incorporate a Calvin Ridley, a true number one, somebody who can take control of the game. I think that's a good move, not only for the Jacksonville Jaguars, but for Trevor Lawrence to kind of really have that key number one where it's just a matchup mismatch. He's going to be the outside threat that defenses are going to have to contain, and it opens up so much more for that offense. So Calvin Ridley, I mean, one of the best route runners to ever come through Alabama. To me, route runners, I'm talking about Alabama route runners. Amari Cooper is number one on my list. Amari Cooper. And then number two, I think I'm going to have to go with Calvin Ridley. I mean, Calvin Ridley was his route running, being able to speed in and out of breaks, influencing defensive safeties, different positions. To me, those are my top two route runners. Then I'll probably put in there third is going to be more of Devontae Smith, Judy, but man, it is going to be interesting. So shouts out to Calvin Ridley. We're glad to have him back. I think he's going to be special within that Jacksonville Jaguars offense. It's going to be pretty interesting. So let's stay in the student sections. To your point, man, there was, Amari Cooper. Let's give him his flowers now. He was such a great route runner. I mean, to me, Amari Cooper, the tape, to me, he was number one on my list. As far as just like route running ability, he was so smooth, so effective, just so manipulative, and how he made DBs just look just off their game. He was so mismatched. And Calvin Ridley kind of was like the next guy up coming from South Florida. So those are my top two Bama receiver route running specialists. So but yeah, shouts out to Amari Cooper, man. I mean, his route running ability is still so great. I mean, he was at Cleveland last year, still putting up crazy numbers in games. So I don't think the Cowboys should have let him go. I think he would have helped Dak Prescott, but they did. It is what it is. So let's see. Brady B says, Dolphins already have a running back who is a speedster, 23 miles per hour. They do have a running back, but the key with the Miami Dolphins running backs, they have Raheem Mostert, they have Jeff Wilson from the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, they have a breakout game, and we were watching them be successful with Tua and the offense. They were rolling, but the key was health. I think they need to get somebody who can be sustainable throughout the season, 17 games. I think that takes a lot of pressure off Tua, keeps him safe. You need to address the offensive line, as Jeff Stapleton said. I think if you're looking in the free agent market, I don't know if the Miami Dolphins have a number one pick, but if they try to trade up, maybe get Jahmyr Gibbs. But I think if you look at I wanted Josh Jacobs to be there, to kind of have the whole Bama backfield. But if you look at Saquon Barkley, the Giants want to put the franchise tag on him. I think that would be an ideal fit, for Miami. The Miami Dolphins basically putting it in all their chips for Tua and to go to the Super Bowl. I mean, they get a Saquon Barkley. You basically have an all-star team with Tua, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Ramsey, Xavier Howard, Bradley Chubb. I mean, the list could go on and on. But shouts out to this comment right here from Spencer. Tyrone Pro Throw's route running was elite. I played with Pro Throw, and to me, I'm going to tell you a quick story about Pro Throw. Pro Throw, Pro Throw and I was the top receivers coming out in 2003, but we played in Alabama, Mississippi All-Star game. So, all the guys, me, Tim Castile, Dominique Lee, Terrence Jones, all the top players from the 2003 class, we're, practicing for a week, and we're going to play against Mississippi in the All-Star game. Tyrone Pro showed us his highlight, and literally he had some of the best highlight I've seen from a high school. So to your point, Pro was just an athlete, in my opinion. I mean, he could do it all. Tyrone Pro could play DB, receiver, safety, quarterback, running back. Man, he could do it all. This guy could not get enough touches. So shouts out to Pro. Just want to share that little story with y'all. Let's stay in the student section. Juwan Taylor signed with the Chiefs for a whopping 4 years, $80 million. I mean, $60 million guaranteed. What do you think, man? I think, it's just how the market is. I mean, the NFL's making the salary caps keep going up, and all these players are going up. The price is going up. So playing that 17 game does put more money in players' pockets. I know everybody wants to get guaranteed money. The key is to get as much guaranteed money up front. That's what I think Lamar Jackson is kind of missing, from having somebody who knows money, finances, numbers, contracts, what's the best way to get things done, and it takes the emotion out of it. But if you're going to get $133 million guaranteed, I would try to do it, just by signing. You mean I can get 133? Then they probably have incentives. If he stays healthy, I believe he'll probably get 185, almost close to 200. So, I just think Lamar means so much to the Baltimore Ravens, but it'd be interesting to see when free agent officially starts this Wednesday, 2 days from now, which teams are going to start calling. Will it be the Tennessee Titans? Will it be the Atlanta Falcons? I think the Falcons should make a move for Lamar Jackson. I mean, if you were in on Deshaun Watson a couple years ago, I think you should be in on Lamar Jackson. It was interesting to see all these teams saying, "Oh, we're out on Lamar Jackson." Like, what? I mean, it makes no sense. Y'all do not have a quarterback. It's the Falcons, the Raiders, the Commanders, all these teams saying they were out on Lamar Jackson. So shouts out to RTR James Knox, RTR. Oh, Jeff Stapleton, we were talking about Amari Cooper. He said Cooper could get that separation from the defenders so quick. I mean, he was so manipulative. When I'm talking about, and I love route running. Me being a receiver, I love the game, the wide receiver position. Watching guys, to me, the GOAT is Jerry Rice. He could get separation like no other. But to have so much appreciation for guys who are really talented at their craft and a great receiver route running, Amari Cooper did it at his best. So get some love in the highlights. I mean, the student section, I got Keith Brown and Matt Cadell in my top 10. I love that group of receivers. Yeah, listen, we had a lot of good guys. DJ Hall, Keith Brown, Tyrone Prothro. I mean, I felt like all four of us, when we were on the field at the same time, we could not be stopped. It was no way you're going to find a way to defend Keith, Prothro, and DJ Hall and myself at the same time. We just need to be in this type of era of offense where they are spreading the ball, running the gun, and four wides option plays. But we were a little bit before our time, but I would not change anything because I get to be here with Football University with the Bama fans, RTR, and all the Bama Nation out here. So it was all a blessing. So let's stay in the student section. Great comments. Prothro catch from Florida when he rolled in the end zone. Yeah, Prothro was on a roll that Florida game. You know, Haiti got injured, but man, Prothro put on the clinic versus that Florida game. And I talked with Keith Brown not too long ago. To this day, Keith Brown has ran the best slant route touchdown I've seen in a while. I mean, it was a clinic. I mean, he beat the guy. Then once he caught it, he outran this guy because Keith Brown was a speedster. We should call him Speed Racer. Ben Edwards says, I played with Marcus Carter and Aaron McDaniels in high school. Yeah, those guys were some of my teammates. Those were great guys. More on the defensive end, special teams. They were really good. So, Nick Saban says, I want to do some content with you, man. Let's do it. Nick Saban, you know where to hit me up, man. Shouts out to Nick Saban Jr. He has a special teams podcast on the CTS-Sports room. I find myself listening to it. Those guys, Nick Saban does a great job. They always do. Keep it going. Oh, what happened? My light went out. Is that what's going on? So, Matt, do you think Bobby Wagner will end up with the Cowboys for his final years? You know, Bobby Wagner, to me, I think is one of the elite linebackers in this free agent market. You heard about Tremaine Edwards going with the Chicago Bears, I believe. But to me, Bobby Wagner, to me, he's a game changer, dominant. You know, Bobby Wagner, if he goes to the Cowboys, that will be a look, but you know, they're probably gonna have to pay. So you never know what Jerry Jones and the Cowboys, you know, they're trying to get to the Super Bowl. That would be a good fit. But I don't think you can go wrong with Bobby Wagner. I think he fits in a lot of defenses. You look at the Washington Commanders, who need help inside. You look at that division, the Eagles could use them. You know, the Giants could use them. So I think Bobby Wagner will have suitors out there. And the Cowboys will probably be, you compare him with the Trevon Diggs, or Micah Parsons, or Dan Quinn-led defense. That could be kind of nasty for them. So Van Edwards brought up a good point. Derrick Henry to the Bills rumors are heating up. I did hear that, you know, Ron Carthon, the new GM, came over, and news did break that they were trying to shop around Derrick Henry. And it'll be interesting to see Josh Allen, Derrick Henry, that backfield in that division. Can that make some noise to offset the Miami Dolphins momentum? What about Derrick Henry and Tua in that backfield? What could that do? Or what about Derrick Henry with the Philadelphia Eagles, with the way they like to run the zone read? Jalen Hurts, Derrick Henry, woo, I mean, that is hard to stop. So it'll be interesting to see where Derrick Henry ends up. So let's stay in a few more student section comments before we wind it down. Nick Van says Nick Saban Jr. is the hardest working man in the report. He is. So it looks like the Broncos will be shopping for a quarterback. I think the Broncos are gonna kind of beef up the offensive line, kind of protect Russell Wilson. I think, Sean Payton's going to roll with Russell Wilson. I think he's going to give it a year. And if it doesn't work this year, he'll probably be looking at like Caleb Williams, Drake May, maybe a Tua if Miami doesn't make the investment. But it will be so interesting. Somebody says, let's Russ cook. Henry and Tua will make me so happy. I think it will make a lot of Bama fans happy. So we're going to end right there on Football University. Thank you to all the student section. Van L was Nick Saban Jr., Brittany B., Linda P., Jeff Stapleton, 6-0, James Knox, who else? Spencer. Shouts out to Spencer. Thank you all for tuning in. I mean, y'all will make the show go. Again, enjoy this weekend. I mean, football. It's going to be a lot of great news, and come back next Monday where we continue to talk about the draft and rave about the Bama guys. We're beginning more in spring training. I know we kind of discussed Milroe and Ty Simpson today, but we'll get into more of that moving forward. But this has been another great episode of Football University with me, Matt Cadell. Have a great weekend and join me next week here next Monday, same time, same place, same channel at Football University. Have a great weekend.